Hi, hello, and how are you? That's right, ladies and gentlemen, that Rockwell timepiece says it's time. So come on in and stay a while. It's time to get coached up with another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. And I'm a proud brand ambassador to the Rockwell franchise. Go to rockwelltime.com, ROCKWELLTIME.com, and use the code Coach20 for 20% off of anything there at that website. That stuff is icy and it is clean and it is nice. And I know my man Sid would be looking good wearing that Rockwell. Also, like and follow the Coach Scott Field Show on our Facebook page. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that bell so you can get notifications for our live links and updates. If you're listening to us in podcast form, Sidney Moncrief and I say turn that knob up. We're about to put that flavor in your ear and continue watching us on DBTV Monday through Fridays, where we have a near 300 million households that we're in around the globe. And thank you to our 300,000 viewers daily. Also, watch us on CSTV on Wednesdays, and also check us out on the Rewind Sports 60. Appreciate your continued support. Enough of the blah blah. You guys are here to hear my man Sidney Moncrief. I have a list of honors and accolades, and I'd have no time to ask questions if I ran through all these. As David Letterman, another Indiana boy, used to say, this man needs no introduction. 2019 Hall of Fame inductee, five-time NBA All-Star, two-time NBA Defensive Player of the Year. Jerseys have been retired at the University of Arkansas with the Milwaukee Bucks. Sidney, welcome to the show, my man.
Hey, Scott, I want to know about that watch. I'm about to go online and see if that 20% is real or if it's just advertising.
You got to, man. I'll tell you what, that thing is clean, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm going online later. Definitely will take a look at it.
Got to. So, Sidney, gosh, I think it's great, and I'm grateful that you're taking time to come on for our viewers and our listeners. You've had just an amazing career, and it all started off there for you with the University of Arkansas with Coach Eddie Sutton. What were some of the fondest memories you have with Coach Sutton leading them into the Final Four back, what was it, 78 or so?
Yes, it was ages ago. But it feels like yesterday for some reason.
Yeah.
Because in college, you draw upon so many relationships of your teammates. And although I played a lot more games in the NBA, the college days stick out the most because of the times you were together. Back then, as you know, Scott, you had unlimited practice time. Coaches did not have a limit as to 20 hours per week. They could just work you until they want to stop. My fondest memories of just working so hard. We had just tough practices. We were prepared. We were in great condition. Coach Sutton taught us how important it was to play defense and play defense and play defense again. We had some of the most amazing drills. I think they were cruel drills where we had to dive on the floor for basketballs and take charges all the time. And we had to crawl on the floor and fight for the ball and then score at the bucket. All those things just helped me to become so mentally tough as a person and as a basketball player. But the memories I have would be practice and the preparation that we put into being a great team.
Yeah. Now, was your Final Four, was that in Salt Lake City?
My Final Four was in the Checker Dome. You know you're getting old when stadiums are torn down, but the old Checker Dome in St. Louis, Missouri, it was Notre Dame, Duke, Kentucky, and Arkansas. We were in the Final Four in 1978. Great games doing in St. Louis, and we had that's a memory just sticks out because the Checker Dome seated like 18,000 people. It's an old facility. I'll never forget when we walked out on the court. Smoking was allowed back then.
Oh,
A haze of smoke. It wasn't smoke from the fireworks and all that pregame show. It was people smoking cigarettes and what have you. through the coughing, we managed to play 40 minutes of basketball. Yeah.
That's like those European stadiums over there. So I understand. And so now that you've jogged my memory, I appreciate that because it was the year after it was Magic and Larry and Salt Lake City. But I mean, think about it. You guys were going against and beat Notre Dame in the constellation game of that Final Four, if I remember right.
It was the last consolation game for NCAA tournaments. We beat Notre Dame. Ron Brewer hit the last second shot. But that last year, my senior year, we lost to Larry Bird in the, I guess, the Elite Eight.
Yeah.
Right? So I was in Salt Lake City.
Yeah, there you go.
But it was not for playing basketball for a team. It was more of an all-star team. Back then, you played an all-star game with seniors from different colleges, and we played that game in Salt Lake City.
Wow. And I remember seeing a photo of you with a lot of people in that All-Star game. I mean, there was Larry Bird, there was Magic Johnson. There was, I mean, what a great era of basketball that you came up in. And you talked about it before, how Eddie Sutton helped prepare your mindset and made you the tough player that you were, on both ends of the court with that defensive mindset of yours.
Scott, what you saw, the picture you saw was from the Playboy All-American team.
There
Remember back then, Playboy had a preseason All-American team, and they would fly you out to LA to take this. Well, you were on the George Burns and Bob Hope. They had a special. So you were on that show, right? That was amazing. You were on the show, and then you took that photograph. Darrell Griffin was in the photograph, of course, Larry Bird. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, just a lot of great players in that particular photograph. I always remember being in the dressing room. A lot of younger people wouldn't understand this. And there was George Burns and there was Bob Hope. And they were just holding this casual conversation about the show and asking me a couple questions before the show. Yeah. And with great memories.
What was one of the comments or conversations that you had with those guys? Because I mean, when you think about it, I mean, those guys are legends.
They're legends. I don't remember. They were older, and I guess I was younger, and my memory was as bad as their memory. So I just remember them asking me questions, just personal questions, general questions, and I just remember how professional they were. It's just like, you realize that the game of entertainment is so much about timing, professionalism, practice, just like basketball, just like sports.
Right. That's awesome. Well, and then, of course, after you play for Arkansas, you were the 5th overall pick by those Milwaukee Bucks. Take us through what it was like to get that phone call, knowing that you were being drafted. And then, of course, I'm going back. I mean, that's with Bob Lanier and Robert Parrish. I mean, that was the '82 All-Star game. But that team that you had, Kent Benson, Junior Bridgman, Lloyd Walton,
Marques
Johnson. Wow, what a squad!
Dave Myers.
Yeah,
we had just a great team. Quinn Buckner was on that team.
That's right.
Guys, Richard Washington played at UCLA. A lot of guys that had won a college championship or had been in the Final Four was on that team. Ernie Brumfield was on that team.
Ernie, yes.
It was a Harvey Catches, a very good friend of mine. It was a very good environment to come into as a rookie.
Wow. Who was one of the players who took you under their wing and welcomed you to being a pro and kind of taught you the ropes on how to take care of yourself and those kind of things?
Well, Junior Bridgman, he was my host, him and Doris, my wife Deborah at the time. They hosted us when we came to Milwaukee, and I became very good friends with Junior and Harvey Catchings during that stretch of time. But they just knew how to prepare themselves to play basketball. And you could not have asked for a better combination of players. And then we had John Killalay, who was a defensive whiz, and Don Nelson. As Don Nelson, of course, the head coach, John Killalay was assistant coach. Mike Schuler, a great NBA coach and a college coach at Rice. He was one of the assistants. And it was a special moment in time to where a small town like Milwaukee, of course, back then it was a smaller city,
Yeah.
And to go there to play basketball in that environment was something special.
Was that a smooth transition for you from going from Fayetteville, to a smaller market team? Did it make it a little bit easier for you? Because I mean, it's basketball, and you're playing, that rigorous schedule to get your body prepared. But because it was a small town, was it easier for you, Sidney?
It was easier for me. I was in Little Rock most of the time, but Little Rock is still not near the size of Milwaukee, but certainly bigger than Fayetteville was. So for me, it wasn't really a big adjustment for me because Milwaukee had a small town feel, and all the teammates we embraced each other. The fans were tremendous, how they supported the team. The only problem was it was not a major airport, which meant a lot of one-stop flights. Didn't have a lot of one-stop flights to the city. I could not have picked a better place to play to start my basketball career than Milwaukee.
Wow. And
Well,
and
I didn't
court,
pick it; they picked me. I take
yeah,
that
there you
back.
go. So take us to when you got that phone call and they're like, "Hey, you're going to Milwaukee." Who was it that called you, and then who did you let know first?
Well, first of all, I wasn't sure where I would be drafted. I remember back then you didn't have the Chicago pre-draft to
That's right.
where you get the measurements, you play basketball, but you were able to go to NBA teams for them to give you an examination. I'm sorry, but I went to Chicago. Chicago Bulls thought about picking me. I went to Chicago. I had bad knees, and I did the Cybex test, and I flatlined. So they said, "No, he's not going to last more than 1 year." So, but Natalie wanted me, and he said, "Well, let me send you to my Dr. Leach in Boston, Massachusetts." He said he's a great doctor. I want him to look at you. I trust his judgment. I went to Boston. The doctor looked at me and he said, "Hey, you could probably play 6 or 7 years without any problem as long as you maintain your strength in your knees." I said, "Okay, cool, cool." So I wasn't sure if it was going to be Milwaukee, Seattle, Detroit was talking about drafting me. I was in New York during that time. Back then, they didn't send everyone to
Yeah.
New York. They sent the five quote top players. Magic was in that group. We hung out a little bit, and David Greenwood was in that group. Uh, Bill Cartwright was in that group. I was in the group. I didn't really get a call. I was there on site when they said you're picked by the Milwaukee Bucks. My mom was there. My stepfather was there. My girlfriend at the time was there. So I didn't tell anybody because everybody knew from the newspaper, and the people that needed to know my mom the most, she was there. But it wasn't like it is now. It wasn't a
Right.
big law like you have now. It's just like we took a photograph. I don't think we went up individually. We took a photograph together and then pretty much sat down until our names were called.
Yeah, so you five were the green room. That's it.
That's it. That was it.
Good stuff right there.
I'll never forget, Scott. I was had never been to New York. No, I had never been to New York before, and I said, "Well, why don't we go for a carriage ride at Central Park? Oh, let's walk through Central Park with my girlfriend." So we started to walk through Central Park, and I had at least three people ask me if I wanted to buy drugs before I took 10 steps. I thought, "Okay, time to turn around."
That,
I'm
that
not
big
ignorant.
that big city life right there.
Big city life.
You mentioned Nelly and how influential he was on your career. And when I think Nelly, I think innovator. What did Don Nelson? I mean, I'm sure you learned so many valuable life lessons and basketball from him. But what are some things that stick out to you about Coach Nelson?
Coach Nelson knew how to take a player and work his system around a player's talent. He was a matchup coach. In college, you didn't have matchup coaches. You ran your sets, and whoever got the ball got the ball. Coach Sutton was smart enough to know get the ball in Ron, Sidney's, or Marvin's hands. Marvin Depp, Ron Brewer, or Sidney. But in general, Nelly was a pure matchup coach. He could look at the matchups on the court during the game, before the game, and just figure out this is where our strength is. We're going to go to this strength. So he started posting me. He started posting me up early in my career because I was 6'4". I could jump and had good inside moves. Most coaches would not have done that. but he ran me off the post, that little UCLA cut, posted
Yep.
me up, gave me the basketball. He just he just knew how to take advantage of my skill set, which was limited at the time. But that skill set was really strong, and he took advantage of it. Also,
Uh,
he understood matchups. He understood what to say, when to say it. He understood how to practice, when to practice, how hard to practice. All those little nuances, since he had played in the NBA, he understood those things.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to describe it. And I think back to, those early Milwaukee days and seeing him with the ties that look like a fish. I'm like, this guy is awesome.
Yeah, yeah, fish ties, and he didn't really dress for it. He didn't like dressing.
Yeah.
Like dressing up. He had the fish ties, and he wore tennis shoes or official shoes, shoes that officials wore. And the NBA told him that he couldn't show logos back then. He couldn't have logo shoes for the coaches on the bench. So he took some athletic tape and just put tape on the side of the shoes, and that's how he dressed every ball game with athletic shoes and a really bad suit and an ugly fish tie. So he wasn't really concerned about the pretense of how he looked. He was
That's
all
right.
about coaching and winning and making sure he got the best out of his players.
I like and now he's barefooted and flip flops out in Maui, so good for him, right?
Now he's barefoot and he's doing great.
That's right. That's right. Um, you know, Five-time NBA All-Star, and I kind of led into that a little bit before. 1982 was the first year you were named to an All-Star, and you had competed against these guys for years. But when you go into that locker room in 1982 and look around and see Julius, you see Nate, you see Larry, you see Isaiah, you see Artis Gilmore. How did that make you feel to know that, wow, you're amongst the elite and you're competing with the best to showcase the best?
It's really strange, Scott. I didn't feel anything.
Yeah.
I don't get up or down about very much of anything. I don't. And so I don't even remember how I felt. I know it wasn't a feeling of, wow, I made it. I'm in the NBA. I'm an all-star. Look at all these great guys, all these great players around me. But I knew I was in the all-star game. I knew I was in special company when I was on the court doing the game. I made a cut to the basket, and I didn't think I was open. But guess what? Nate Archibald knew I was open. So he threw the ball and hit me in the head and went out of bounds.
Great stuff.
Someone else threw a pass that I normally don't get, and I
Yeah.
wasn't ready for it. So I had like 2 turnovers, if I recall, and that was based on players that could see the game on a different level. And
Wow.
like, whoa, okay, this is something. But I changed the All-Star game I remember the most because I didn't like All-Star games. I didn't really like attending All-Star games, and I made the All-Star game. I remember telling Nelly the last one I made that I did not want to go to the All-Star game. I was just burnt out. I was tired. And he said, no, you got to go. NBA. But remember, you probably don't remember, Dallas, Texas, 1985. I think it was 1985. We played the All-Star game. And at that time, the NBA was sort of publicly question marks because of the freebasing, the cocaine, and ratings were down, and people were not feeling the NBA as much. That game, Magic got together with the players, I'm assuming whoever, but I never have ever seen the intensity and the talent and the showcasing as I did at the beginning of that particular game. Now, we didn't just mess around like they do now in All-Star games. Even
Right.
when I played in 83, it was competitive and guys were balling out trying to win the game. But this game was a signature game that told the fans, that told the world that we're back and we're balling and you need to watch us. And I
Wow.
wish I could get the tape. I was on the bench. I didn't start that game. I remember being on the bench watching the game. And of course, they tipped off. And I was like, oh, here comes another All-Star game. All of a sudden, I said, dang, they're playing hard. You
That's
can imagine that much talent playing that. Not that they didn't play hard before, but I'm telling you
right.
right now, this was a different level of intensity with talent to match.
Right. And as a player, you can sense the intensity and how hard they're going, that you know what, this is not just a showcase for the fans. These guys are competing, and when I step out there, I've got to step my game up.
Absolutely. You better step it up or you would be on the bench because the level was so high. That was the most memorable All-Star game that I can
Wow.
recall simply because so much was at stake during that time. And the
Wow.
statement needed to be made. And I think I give the Magic deserves probably the credit for that because
Wow.
he set the tone and he understood the magnitude and who was watching and what needed to be done.
That's interesting. I like that because when I think 1985, Dallas was a newer franchise at that time, so that's probably why they were awarded the NBA All Star Game, to kind of showcase the city and that kind of thing. Um, I love hearing those stories. I- we, you had to compete against the Boston Celtics for years.
I said something, Scott, because I also
Yeah,
played in was that when was it Isaiah Thomas Michael Jordan freeze out game? Was that 86?
that sounds about right. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I think I played in that game too. And it's so funny because like Isaiah said, I never detected any hint of anyone trying to freeze Michael Jordan out of the.
right.
I never. Sometimes you can see
Yeah,
when a player is playing buddy ball or someone is open, they just blatantly miss that player that's open. It's just like Michael was Michael. Michael was the greatest player on the planet, and Isaiah was right there with him. I just never saw that happen,
yeah.
but it became a big story for years and years and years. It became such a big story.
And I wonder too if that didn't evolve or the story kind of evolve or escalate because of the dream team, and then people are trying to go back to see where did it start, where did it begin, and I mean it's just players competing and showcasing skills the way I saw it. I mean,
It's,
people
it's
are just trying to make a story.
absolutely. It's not any player that's worth their salt that's not going to compete and not like a guy.
That's right. That's
Especially when
exactly.
you're not going to like the player you're playing against, and that's okay.
Yep. Yep.
Don't have to like them. He doesn't have to like you. She doesn't
Yep.
have to like you. But all that matters is you out there competing and trying to win and trying to get the best of that player, win that game.
Right. There you go. Well said. I was kind of going with, you had such tough matchups with the Bucks, when you were competing against Larry, and the one year, you guys take them out, swept Larry Bird. You're at 6'4", and you were matched up against some of the best scorers in the league at that time. What was it about Larry Bird that was so challenging? Was it just the footwork, or was it just his trash talk that would get into the defender's head? But what made Larry Bird special and unique in your mind because you competed against him?
Well, he was 6'9". People forget.
Right.
I think my limit as far as being a great defender is probably 6'7" in average player. So once you start going past 6'7" and their skill level increases, I'm still 6'4". You can't change that.
Right.
And the guy's super talented. So Larry was 6'9", number one. Number two, he had the toughness of a gangbanger in South Central LA. He was
Yeah.
you know, he
Hey,
feared he feared nothing. He was as tough as nails. And fundamentally, he had the footwork. He knew how to pass. His basketball IQ was one of the probably best in the history of basketball. He had the entire package. People don't give him total credit for that, but he had the total package as it relates to being a basketball player.
and I'm glad that you hit on that because, yeah, small town French Lick, Indiana guy, but yet he loved to compete and he loved to try to find ways to beat you. And I like how you talked about his IQ, but the spatial awareness and his ability to pass, I think sometimes gets overshadowed because he was such a great scorer, in those years in the 80s. So I'm glad to hear you say that.
When you watch video of Larry Bird, if you study video for a great player, he probably had more precise cuts to the basket than anybody.
Yeah.
Where
You
he
kind of
would make a cut, the right angle, and got a pass for a layup.
And I agree with that because it wasn't just a cut, but it was a cut with a purpose. And when he cut with those angles, it put pressure on that defense, and you had to have at least six eyes on him, where three players are watching him, which opened up something for the pick and roll or for McHale or whatever. But I agree with you that the cutting with a purpose was there.
With purpose. And most great players, you don't see that.
Yeah,
They're all on the ball, dribbling the basketball, making plays, dribbling, shooting over people. Larry Bird had that. Michael Jordan had that instinct. He would cut from the weak side a lot.
yeah.
He would just be on the weak side, just like he's smoking a cigar.
You're going to get the defense to relax and turn their head. In that split second they turn their head, there's that cut.
So I always knew when I guarded Michael, if he's weak side, it's like he has the ball. You could never just assume he's not involved in the play. Larry Bird was the same way. But most great players, they like to come out to get the ball. But those two could cut weak side, catch the ball, and score layups or dunks or whatever.
Wow. Love hearing you share those stories. Who was the toughest guard matchup for you? Because, I mean, Larry, with his size, 6'8", 6'9", was a tremendous, like a point forward, even though it wasn't labeled that back in the day because he was such a good passer. But as far as guards, who did you know mentally, oh my gosh, I've got to bring it today? Of course, you brought it every day, without a doubt.
Stop. Real talk. I brought it every day. I didn't get
That's
any
right.
about guarding Michael Jordan as I did John Jordan.
There you
Because
go.
it didn't really matter to me. But to answer your question, certainly Michael Jordan was 6'6", quick, athletic, very, very smart, and knew how to play the game of basketball. He got better every year, and he competed like crazy. So he would be in that category. But right alongside him, right is Andrew Toney.
Oh, yeah, Sixers. Yeah.
Philadelphia 76ers, 6'3", big body, quick as a cat before he hurt his foot. Could go left, could go right, could shoot left and left, right and left. He could do two dribbles, pull up jumper. He could catch it, stand still, wait, pull up and shoot a three. He could go in the post. Offensively, with the basketball, is nothing he could not do on either side of the court. So he would be there, George Gervin, because of he was 6'9" again, 6'9", and had length, smooth, smart, had all the shots, had more range than most guys. So you had to always, he could post you up, he could throw a hook, he could shoot a finger roll, he could shoot a three-point shot, he could do anything he could do offensively. So those would be three of the top players that I faced.
And I'm glad you mentioned Andrew Toney because he doesn't get discussed enough. But yeah, with his body, he would bang just to create the space to be able to get that shot off in the paint, which I think he did very well and doesn't get enough credit. I mean, you hear, Vinnie Johnson, the microwave, oh, he's heating up. But Andrew Toney was that dude with that 76er squad who was a great complementary player, for that team.
And it didn't matter who was guarding him. Dennis Johnson was one of the greatest defenders at the guard position in the history of the game of basketball. He would torch Dennis. He would torch me. It wouldn't matter. He was just a very uncanny offensive player.
And see, I'm glad you said that because we're talking about athletes. I don't think you get enough credit or enough talk about how athletic you were. I mean, you were a high riser, in the college days that still transferred, but you were just such a tough-minded competitor that was a two-way player. There was none of this talk about load management back in those days. Sidney, you brought it day in and day out, and I think that's what drew people to enjoy watching the Bucks and their style of play, to watch a Sidney Moncrief.
It's so funny because I do workshops now, Scott. We do workshops for adults and for young people, team enhancement, leadership, diversity and inclusion. We do entrepreneurship, anything that deals with building people, we do. So for the younger group, before my workshops, I put a video on. It's a highlight of the Hall of Fame videotape that they have. It's a minute, 52 seconds, because they don't know who I am. Adults don't know, but kids definitely don't know. And I put on that tape, and I find myself saying, man, you were really quick. You were really fast. All the things I had forgotten. It's been so long ago. I didn't really know. But I watched it tape 100 plus times. So I know pretty well now, but when I watch it, the explosiveness from here to here was really a lot faster than I thought. And then the body control of being able to manipulate and make shots, all those things I worked on in the summer. But you tend to forget that when you're out of the game for a while. But I get reminded because I do a lot of workshops. I have to show the video. A lot of I stop watching. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. And I think that's great because that's why I was excited to have you on, because I almost want to reintroduce to you to a younger generation of all these YouTubers and technology. Sid, I look at the NBA top 75 and I scratch my follically challenged head and go, how does Sidney not get in the top 75 of the NBA? Now, this is just my opinion, but Sidney, I feel like, you belong there because you played in that era where it was just tough, hard-nosed basketball, and you brought it every game.
Yeah, but
And
they don't really respect two-way players like that. And that's okay because it's all about the number of points you scored. So if you don't score X number of points over your career, then they don't look at basketball as being a two-way sport, offense, defense, on the other aspect. And I don't mind. That's how they view the game. I don't really get upset with it. I don't really think about it a lot, but that goes back to you don't really respect. You think basketball is just an offensive game. So if you score 20,000 points, 17,000 points, 25, you automatically go in that category of top 75 player, which maybe you were a top 75 offensive player, but were you a top 75 total NBA player? Probably not, but that's how they rate it.
yeah, well, and again, I'm looking through a coach's lens, and I know a Sidney Moncrief would make a Scott Fields a phenomenal coach because you were a great player who had all those intangibles that don't get talked about enough. So I want to give you your flowers because, my man, you did it.
I appreciate that, Scott.
Yeah, and I'm being sincere with that. Um, Gosh, there's so many directions we can go with this conversation, but I'm looking at, man, scoring February 24th of 1983, you had 42 points against the Rockets. That's getting buckets. You dropped 42 in an era where defense, where you got into the paint, you were getting knocked down, and you still dropped 42. My man, you were getting some things done.
Yeah, but you know what? The most impressive, a young lady from Iowa, she scored 41 points in the Final Four game. But you know what I looked at? I didn't look at her points. I looked at it took her 19 shots to score 41 points. She had a 3-point line. When I scored 40, 42, whatever, I think I did that on like 17 shots or,
Wow.
and to me, that's what, when someone scores a lot of points, of course, now you can't tell because 3 points. I'm not saying 3-point shots don't matter. I'm not saying they're not important, but it's still a 3-point shot in an era where you didn't have the 3-point shot, or it wasn't really a big deal back then. So when I see guys or young ladies score a lot of points, first thing I look at, Scott, I go right down to the total shots taken, and then the total number of 3-point shots they made. A guy scores, a lady scores, guy made 30 points, and I see they had what 15. They had 15 3-point shots.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you know,
Well,
yeah, that's 30, but it's you score 30 the same way with three
yeah,
points. You get one foul shot, you get one 2-point shot, you got all 3-point shots. So
yeah.
that's
Well,
something.
what you and I are talking about there is proficiency. You are scoring at a high rate and your percentages are high. And I'm just going to throw this out there. I heard an interview recently with Mark Aguirre, and he calls today's basketball candy ball. So it makes me laugh. But to
Marques
us,
scored 40 easy.
oh, hey.
Easy.
That's right. And then, of course, then I look at May 15th of 1987, you had 34 points in a playoff game. And yet, again, the way that you scored, but you played so hard and you allowed your defense to be transitioned to get offense. And that's something that you don't see as much anymore because the way the rules are now, the way the NBA likes it, you know, scoring is big numbers and the crowd likes it and the TV ratings seem to like it even though they fluctuate. But when you played, Sidney, man, it was just, and I know we sound like old heads talking here, but gosh, you played so hard defensively that, you know what, that defense traveled. And that's why you guys had success in postseason, because some nights shots wouldn't fall, but you could rely on your defensive intensity, and you were that guy.
Yeah, I like the fact that I've always taken pride in being an all around player. From the time I was in high school, even though Coach Elvis, my high school coach, when I was scoring points, he showed me a tape one game after the next day, and I thought I had played so well. He called me in the little small office with the the little reel to reel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a great game, 30 points, I don't know, 10 rebounds. I didn't pass a lot, so I can't say I had a triple double. But I thought I played well. We won the game, and come on in here, son. Let me show you something. And he commenced to just rip my butt open because look at you on the weak side. You don't know what's going on. You're not helping your teammates. Your defense is over. He went on and on about my defense. And until that time, I had no idea that I had to make improvement on the defensive end. But he helped to wake me up. And then when I went to Arkansas, Coach Sutton kept me woke. Yeah, he actually put me on a different level. And then Coach Nelson and Coach John Killalay, Mike Schuler, they taught me the more physical brand of NBA defense. I just kept leveling up on the defensive end. And my offense just was there, and rebounding was good, and passing the ball. I just wanted to be a complete player. That was always my goal. It wasn't to score. I didn't want to take 25, 30 shots. That's not, I don't know if I could do that consistently, but I knew I could play good defense. I could score. I could rebound. I could do all the other things on the basketball court, night in and night out.
And that's a mindset. Ladies and gentlemen, we're sitting here talking with Hall of Famer Sidney Moncrief here on the Coach Scott Field Show, telling some great stories. Talking about that defensive mindset, and you talked about your workshops and things earlier. What would you tell a young athlete? Because there's so much analytics in the game today, but what you played with heart can't be measured. So how do you tell or inspire a young guy or empower them with a tool set to be like, you need this mindset to compete on a consistent level defensively? How do you get that message across to a young player?
I was watching a movie last night. I'm trying to pull up the quote. So hold on a minute. I
Yeah.
was at a movie last night, and it had the most amazing quote about exactly what you said.
Okay.
And if I can pull it up, it said, "How you do anything is how you will do everything."
Ooh.
That was a quote.
I like that.
Anything is how you would do everything. And that was kind of my mantra, as I didn't know that at the time. So I would tell players that pay close attention to every second, every minute you're on the basketball court trying to perfect your game, because it will carry over into all aspects of your life. Certainly on the basketball court or football field, it's going to carry over. I don't even get into the basketball part. I get into, okay, how hard are you willing to work? How hard are you willing to focus on perfection or being excellent in your craft? Those are the type of things I think players need to understand. And are you willing to be a great teammate? Are you willing to be coachable? All those things are very, very important. If you're willing to do those things, guess what? Your talent will probably catch up with you at some point. Hopefully your skill, which your talent might not, but your skill might catch up at some point, and you will become a good basketball player.
Yeah, and see that's gold, what you just shared right there. And I'm glad that we've taken the time to allow you to talk about the attention to detail and focus on the process and bring that work ethic every day where it becomes habitual. So great stuff there, Sidney. You played with hundreds of teammates. And I think of recently out here at Salt Lake City, we had the NBA All-Star Weekend, and they gave out the Bob Lanier Award. You were teammates with Bob Lanier and his community service, and Pau Gasol actually was the recipient of that. Bob Lanier, in your words, describe Bob Lanier as a player in person.
Bob Lanier was a big teddy bear. He was an intimidator, intimidator, very scary if you were a weak person.
You look at that size 21 tennis shoe, that's intimidating too.
Yeah, but he had the heart. He had the heart of he was just a good, solid person who did not mind expressing his opinion about things to leadership, to ownership. And he was saying in such a fun way, they couldn't even be mad at him. Why don't you have any black people coaching for your team? You don't have any black people on your resume. You just said like that. It's like, what? Oh, what? But they took it how he gave it to them, and he knew he could give it to them in that manner where they could hear it in a fun way, but in a very serious way.
That's right.
He had a very strong conscience about right and wrong, and he was just a great, one more great basketball player and teammate.
Wow, I like hearing that.
If you could not play better with Bob Lanier, then you shouldn't be playing.
Wow,
Because
wow.
He could pass the ball. He would set great picks for you. He was an enforcer. He could do everything on the basketball court. I'm not just saying this. He's one of my all-time favorite teammates to play with, simply because he knew how to play the game. Wow. And he didn't back down. I like guys that didn't back down, and he was in that category.
Good stuff there. Another former guest of my show who just, again, a Chicago guy, hard worker, Terry Cummings. That's right. Again, here's a guy who knew, kind of undersized for being inside, but yet played with heart, played with intensity. You guys playing together. What was it like to know that you had a TC, over your shoulder in the paint, going to war with you?
Well, Terry's a prime example of, if he had not had the heart issue, then he's Hall of Fame.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
Certified Hall of Fame player. And the thing I like about Terry, I talk about consistency. You knew every night what you would get from Terry. You knew he would give you 20-something, 10 rebounds, the toughness. He loved to compete. He was a good teammate, and he was extremely talented off the court. He could sing, he could play instruments, he could write songs.
And in the ministry as well.
In the ministry. Yeah, he never really let basketball take over his life totally as a player. And that's saying quite a bit, because he had so much free time. But when he had free time, he was always doing his music.
Yeah.
But always ready to play basketball. He was a good teammate.
That's right. I love that. And again, there's hundreds of them. And it's once you've gone to battle and gone through war with people, it's hard to pick favorites. It's like kids. Well, I can't really tell you which is my favorite kid, because they're all special in their own way. But who were some other role players that you played with that probably don't get their flowers enough?
I would have to look at a roster, because I forget basketball stuff really quick. I know I'm saying a lot of things about basketball, but if you bring it out, you're bringing some good things out. But I really don't remember a lot. I played with so many teammates. I know that Harvey Catchings, Junior Bridgman, Paul Prezi, as far as tremendous players and guys. Junior and Harvey kept me. I don't know if they kept me out of trouble or not. But we did everything together on the road, and that helps when you have that relationship and friendship on the road, that you can do things with guys. And they were right there for those years. I was never more upset when Nelly and the Bucks traded those two guys in Marques to the LA Clippers. So that was like taking a lot away from me as a player, but as a person. So those certainly would be two of the guys. And Marques Johnson, another underrated teammate. We didn't talk a lot, but Marques, we had this signal that we got each other. We understood each other as players, and he could just get it done. I'll never forget the most amazing competition I've seen. Just say we're playing a team and they have a good player and you have a good player and they're going at each other was Marques Johnson versus Dr. J in the playoffs. I forgot.
Ooh.
And my goodness, I'm knowing I'm just watching I'm knowing I'm balling out. I'm not really saying, dang, that was a good move. Woo, that was a great. But, you know, but
You can't help it. Yeah.
that particular game, the way they were going at each other, I was like, oh my goodness. Of course, I had my hands full with Bobby Jones and Andrew Toney. I had to be focused on them.
Right.
But in general, that was a game or the series that I remember where Marques, you could just see the greatness as a player and as a competitor because Dr. J is the best, certainly one of the best that
That's
ever.
right.
And they were going at it big time.
Wow. And I think it's fun to sit here and jog our memories and reminisce a little bit. And I know I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I just think of, those teammates and those battles and those rivalries and then just, the fun bus rides and the fun locker room talk, that camaraderie that you're talking about.
Well, I'll tell you one player though that sticks out that doesn't get his due because he was a sixth man. And people forget. I had to guard him every day just about. That's Ricky Pierce.
Ricky, yeah, wow.
Ricky Pierce was probably in the Andrew Toney category. He didn't have that speed, but as far as being in, he was really impossible to guard. He was, when you say impossible, very few players you can put in that category, but he was right in that category. He had the really big body. He was strong. He could shoot over you. He could draw the foul. He could post you up with his body. He could shoot the basketball. Didn't have a lot of range, but had enough range during that time to be able. He was 20 points off the bench, easy, and he was in that category of someone that people kind of moves on. So of course, people forget a lot of people, and that's okay. But he was a great player.
I love that. Good stuff. We've got, 6, 8 minutes here left. Thinking about the NBA when you played with the travel, is there a favorite restaurant or a favorite city that you enjoyed going into? Because you're like, oh man, that's just some good food there after the game.
Yeah, I always liked Oakland. I was like the Bay Area. I always loved going to the old Coliseum in Oakland and going there was a really good restaurant there. So Oakland was Bay Area was always we would just take the ferry or taxi over to San Francisco and hang out. Just that was one place. New York, of course, we would go to Jack's Nest and a couple other restaurants. Always New York was always in that category. LA, but Seattle is what I love. I love me some Seattle when I would travel. It was something about that city that it was a small place, but they had that really. I like cities that have a very vibrant core.
There you
And
go.
so I like Boston, I like Philadelphia, I like New York, and I like Seattle because you could be downtown. You didn't have to. You could walk. You go to a restaurant. You go to a movie. You do everything on your feet without having to get in a taxi.
There you
Those
go.
towns I like.
There you go. That's good. And again, I'm just sitting there thinking, what a cool era that you played in because of the travel. It wasn't on these. You were commercial flying, and then there wasn't these private jets and things at that time. But yet, it had to create a bond and a closeness with your teammates where you looked out for each other, and it was a brotherhood and a fraternity.
It did, and also it allowed you to enjoy a city because you didn't have to get on a plane that same night.
Yeah.
You always would stay over in the city and then fly out the next morning. If you have relationships in that city or relatives in that city, you got a chance to see them and spend quality time with them. I want to say a shout out to Dale Harris. He's been having some back issues. Dale
Yeah.
was an assistant coach with Nell, and then he was my head coach, tremendous head coach, great basketball mind. We coached together at the Mavericks, coached together with Golden State. He's been a big inspiration of mine as a coach and as a person.
Uh, he was a guest on the show not even a month ago, and
Okay.
he had great stories, Sidney. I mean,
Yeah,
just
he did.
great stuff. But just a good old boy right there, who just a wealth of knowledge again.
Yes, yes. And he finally got the Hall of Fame this past year, so that was very special.
Well deserved. Well
Okay.
deserved. Well, let's talk about your Hall of Fame induction. You get the call, you're standing up, you're being recognized. Is that nerve-wracking for you to go up and have to give a speech, there at the Hall of Fame, to just this sea of, accomplished people who have already been inducted to the hall?
Not really. I was sick that night, so it wasn't my best night. I got vertigo
Oh,
that morning, and I wasn't feeling good. I was able to still do the speech, but what was really funny is I'm just who I am. I'm very authentic in my everything I do. In the Hall of Fame, you have the words up there, right? And you had to show them your speech, you had to read the words, you had to practice. And so I get up there, and that's just not me. And I started rambling, and the guys on the teleprompter, they were going, they didn't know where I was. So they were moving the words. And I had to say, "Oh, I'm confusing you guys. I'm sorry." That's what I remember the most. But
uh,
it, if you're who you are, you're not nervous.
there
People
you go.
people can take you or not take you. That's
Yeah.
up to them. But I was good to go. Other than I like I said, I wasn't feeling great. I had some people in town that they got to enjoy the moment. It's always special when people feel more excited about something than you do. So,
Well, then you kind of live vicariously through them. You're like, oh, you're excited. I should be
well, you're
too.
excited. Maybe I should be more excited. I remember calling. I called Junior. I said, I'm really struggling with this Hall of Fame thing. This is beforehand. I said, I don't feel excited. I don't know how I should feel. I'm not feeling it, whatever I should feel. And he just reminded me, he said, well, it's only less than 300 people. So at that point, have been in the history of basketball,
Uh,
this
well,
category that have been inducted Hall of Fame. It's a pretty big honor, Sidney. I said,
right.
well, I guess so.
Well, but that also speaks to your character. You mentioned being authentic and being real, but you're also very, very humble. And I think that's something that sets you apart from a lot of your peers, because sometimes people forget where they come from, and they kind of let this ego or this persona take over, and you have never done that or have ever been that, and you still continue to give back to your community and continue to serve and work with youth, and I have a great deal of respect for that, my friend.
Scott, it's always easier to just to be you and just try to be a good person. And some people like that, some people won't. And this goes back to my parents, my aunts, uncles, my mom, my dad, my brothers, sisters. That makes a big difference. Who created that environment for you, right? Who created that environment? And then my wife, my former wife, Deborah, and my current wife, who's keeping you humble? When you get a little too full of yourself, that just okay. Everybody really quick. You ain't all that down.
Oh, that's good stuff. Well, we've got like 2 minutes. You've given just so much gold here. Any last words you can share with the viewers, because I truly want this to be about you and your legacy, and your personality has shown through this, and I'm grateful. But any last words you would like to share with the viewers here today?
No, well, I've written 12 books. We didn't talk about my books. I like to write books. They're real simple books, but I write books, and I don't write them to have a bestseller. Maybe I should. I write them just to help people. And I'm writing number 13. I think number 13 I'm working on now. Yeah, it's called 17 Principles for Living Your Best Life right now. And so I'm working on that because I live my best life. I want other people to have that opportunity to take a glimpse into not just my life, but other principles that will allow you to feel good about you, help others grow, and wake up not regretting anything. Just living your best life right now. So that's those are my parting words. And Scott, we appreciate you and all you've done to help people through your podcast.
Well, Sydney, I appreciate it. It's quality people like you that make me look good, and I'm grateful. So it's empowering, it's inspiring, and ladies and gentlemen, look up Sidney Moncrief, locate those books. Where can people find
But go
your
to
literature?
SidneyMoncrief.com just to see what I'm doing. You can order books, but I don't have a lot of books in inventory, but I can certainly order some and get them to the people. But just to kind of see what we do with our for-profit and nonprofits. Sidney Moncrief, Sidney with an I, because most people, if they're a certain age, Sidney is always with a Y.
Well,
But old school Sidney.
there you go. I like it. Well, Sidney, thank you so much for your time. This has been fabulous. It's been first class. And I truly feel that people who have viewed this and or will listen to it in podcast form will be uplifted and they will get tools for their toolbox. So thank you for that, Sidney. And let's stay in touch. And matter of fact, I was contacted before the show from an NBA coach. And so I'm going to ask you about that as soon as we get off air here. But God bless you. Continue to impact lives, my friend, and keep doing what you're doing. But man, you've made this show a fun one.
Thank you, Scott.
God bless, my friend.
Thank you.